Now the third thing relates to the journalists and the media. Wendy Page is here today, and I thought her presentation really revealed at once the strength of the media, but the weakness of the media. At once there were individual media people who would take up causes, but there were a lot of others who were campaigning in absolutely the other direction because they wanted it all to be wrapped up. There is a natural desire of society, a very understandable desire of society, where you have a very serious crime, and in particular a murder. Society feels very discomforted at an unsolved murder. Society wants the issues resolved and wants finality, and therefore it takes a certain courage to press on against all the forces of inertia and to take a stand. I don't believe that is contrary to the operation of a just legal system. I believe it can sometimes be irritating, it can sometimes be a nuisance, it can sometimes make you question what you hope you don't have to question, but vigorous and independent media are a safeguard to liberty, and I pay my respects to people like Wendy and others who have taken up the cudgels for people. It is true that Mr. Mallard's case may never have come back to the High Court had it not been for journalists, and you have to acknowledge this fact, and as a judge you have to face it as a reality of the world as it is. It may be that we can do better, but that is part of it. So I think we should give a big round of applause to those media people who are conscientious, don't just have a bee in their bonnet and are being irrational, because you sometimes get them as well, but those who are looking at the evidence and trying to make our institutions work better. So I pay my respects to you, Wendy, and to others like you. Now the final thing to say is there is a new ingredient, and the new ingredient is DNA evidence. Why did they stop executing people in Chicago? They stopped executing them because one after another cases were coming up that showed by the DNA analysis that people were not responsible for the crime of which they'd been convicted. There'd been nothing wrong with their trial, the lawyers had been effective, all the arguments had been put, it just happened that the wrong result occurred. There was a case about 4 years ago in the Court of Appeal of Queensland where Justice Williams, a very experienced judge, started his reasons for judgment with the words, "This is a black day for justice in the law of Queensland." I think the case was called the Queen against Button. I think it was another Mr. Button. And the case concerned a mattress on which forcible sex was alleged to have occurred, and Mr. Button had been convicted. But when the Crown kept the mattress, they kept the evidence, they often do. There's a great collector's item in the Crown. The Crown loves to have, the prosecution loves to have the hard evidence, and it's put away in some file in the government repository and it's there. And so they started taking them out in Chicago, and they started testing this evidence, and tested by DNA evidence. In many cases, the person who had protested innocence over many years was found not to be the person whose DNA matched that which had been used at the trial. We have got better at DNA evidence. We have better scientific means, as Mr. Napper has said, and we need to use these means, and innocence projects around the world have become extremely important and extremely popular in law schools and extremely effective because they've been using the DNA evidence and best scientific practice. So I think we've learned a lot from you, Mr. Napper, and I'm very grateful to you for coming to Australia, for your work in our country, and for raising the scientific standards. Science will always trump culture and mythology. It's very important that the Innocence Project should be based on good science, and I thank you for what you've done, for bringing that message to us. But finally, the question that is ultimately posed by this conference is, what can we do to get a better institutional response to this problem? Lord Scarman used to say, the genius of English-speaking people is that they try to find institutional problems for cases. They don't think it's enough to rest on a judge who works 7 days a week, or a journo who is devoted and has a bee in their bonnet, or a good policeman. You've got to have good institutions. In the United Kingdom, following all the Irish cases, a commission to investigate complaints about unjust convictions was established, and it has done important work institutionally. It can sometimes be stimulated by journalists, assisted by Innocence projects, helped by DNA evidence, but it's an institution. And one of the issues we in Australia have to face is, do we need such an Innocence Commission in our country? That question was looked at by the New South Wales Law Reform Commission, and Justice James Wood, a very experienced judge, came to the conclusion we didn't need such a project or such a commission. I'm not quite so sure. James Wood's view was we didn't need it because courts of criminal appeal do the work effectively and justly. But thinking of those big piles of appeal books and human capacity and time, I'm not absolutely so sure that we don't need people with more time in an institutional arrangement. Anyway, that is something I commit to you and ask you to consider, because I think normally it's better to have an institutional response. But I found this morning a very interesting and rewarding experience, and I'm sure it will go on later in the day. But this project here this morning has been a very useful one, and I congratulate everyone involved in it.